healthcare benefits for the county. And I'm also a registered dietitian, so that's kind of my trade and my passion within wellness generally. This is a really old style of presentation, but I updated it, so the information is still relevant. And then I also brought some handouts, so I think this will be more useful that you can take with you and we can kind of chat through. So this is an interesting topic, portion distortion, and I think kind of gives a lot of explanation and understanding about some of the weight struggles that we have in our country today. And so we're just going to go through how things have changed and how portions have changed over time and within our lifetimes, and then talk about some tips on how you can actually control your own environment accordingly. So I think it just skipped. Yeah, there we go. So we'll just give some definition to portion size versus serving size, just so that we're all on the same page, and then just looking back 20 years, comparing what servings used to be versus what they are now. It's kind of scary. And then we'll go through within each food category, what is a portion actually supposed to be, or what's a serving supposed to be. And then some tips, and I think I removed the quiz, so you'll be off the hook on that. And then we'll just go over some of the handouts I brought. So a portion actually is an amount that you eat at any given time. So that's whatever you're choosing that portion, right? So it's whatever that you're putting on your plate. Versus a serving is a true measurement of food or drink. So this is the USDA sets recommended serving sizes, or what the serving size on the nutrition label says. That's a true serving. So oftentimes there's a discrepancy between what a serving is and what a portion is. And we'll go through some examples of this. So over the past 20 years, our portion sizes have increased a lot. And if you can even think back to what a cheeseburger used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago and what it is now, it's drastically different. And just any given meal, it's fine if the portion is bigger than it used to be. But when you have a bigger breakfast, a bigger lunch, a bigger dinner, bigger snacks, then all of a sudden those small amounts of calories really add up and contribute to weight gain, essentially, right? So that's why we're talking about this. And we generally tend to underestimate the amount of food that we eat. We think that we've eaten less than we actually have, and we overestimate what a recommended portion is. So we think a plate full of spaghetti is a portion or a serving, when really, does anyone know what an actual true serving of pasta is?
Smaller than that?
Smaller than that, yeah. It's a half cup. If you can visualize what a half cup is, it's like, oh, geez. So a plate of pasta is really like 4, 5, 6 plus servings. There's a discrepancy there. Yeah. So because of that, large portion sizes are a major contributor to weight gain in our country. And then you couple that with just our reduced activity levels. So when it used to be like this steak and potato dinner, it was after a day of farming outside and spent being active. And now we're basically, desk bound or just in front of our TVs at night. We have an inactive society plus larger portions. There's no wonder that we have trouble with weight. It makes sense. So the first step toward reducing calories and losing weight is to become more mindful and aware of the portions that we're eating. Then hopefully we can do something about it. And there are strategies that we can manipulate our environments to better help us choose different portions. And we'll talk about some tips with that. So a bagel. 20 years ago, a typical bagel was 3 inches in diameter. Now it's, I think, about 5 would be a standard one. How many calories? So that was 140 calories 20 years ago. What would you estimate today's bagel have? 500? Up, down, higher, lower?
Come on, guys.
Yeah. 350.
Oh.
So there's an extra 210 calories. So each one of these, it gives an example of what you actually have to do just to make up the difference. Not for the whole bagel, but just the difference in calories. So based on a 130-pound person, you'd have to rake leaves for 50 minutes. It gives some funny examples. What later is like water aerobics or something, where I'm like, who actually does water aerobics? But these are the National Institute of Health has a bunch of examples like this. So that's what I pulled from, because it's a good source. But, oh, it's a 6-inch bagel. I thought it was 5. Spaghetti and meatballs. So 20 years ago, it was 1 cup of spaghetti with sauce and 3 small meatballs. Now it's larger than that. And that was 500 calories. What would you estimate today's to be? In the average serving? 800? Yeah. It's actually more than double. It's over 1,000 calories in a standard average serving size, which would be like going out to eat. So that's about 2 cups of cooked pasta and 3 large meatballs, compared to 1 cup and 3 small meatballs. So it's an extra 525 calories for just 1 meal. So you have to clean your house for 2.5 hours to burn off the extra calories. Who wants to do that? Not me. A muffin, a blueberry muffin. So 1.5 ounces was the typical serving size for a muffin 20 years ago. Today, what would you guess it to be? Any guesses? 400, 500, 600? Ooh, hello. Today's 5-ounce muffin has 500 calories in it. And we often think like muffins are healthy, but sometimes it's like you may as well just go with the 2 donuts or something, right? If you're trying to do something healthy, oftentimes eating a muffin is not really accomplishing that goal. You'd have to vacuum for 1.5 hours to burn off the extra calories. I thought I had one more example because there was something with water aerobics, but I must have not included that one. Maybe because it was water aerobics. So anyway, those are just some insights. Does that surprise you guys at all? A little bit. It's kind of crazy how large our portions are. And I think that most of us are like, yeah, things have changed. But when it changes slowly over time, it's not like overnight we doubled things. It's just slowly but surely over time it increases. And then the demand is there. You're not going to choose to pay $10 for a plate of spaghetti and meatballs if you can go to the next place and pay $10 for a plate that's double in size, right? So then it just perpetuates itself, unfortunately. So a serving size example, I like this little meme. That half cup of ice cream is the perfect serving size, said no one ever. So if you just buy a pint of ice cream, do you know how many servings are in a pint of ice cream? Based on the nutrition label. It's 4. Does that surprise you? I mean, most people I know, including myself, I tend to eat the whole pint of ice cream. That's just what we mostly do. Maybe you share it with somebody that's sitting on the couch with you. But you're usually not eating only 1/4 of it. That's for certain. So kind of part of this is actually the nutrition fact labels, just recognizing that no one's really following the serving sizes on the nutrition labels are actually being updated. And so there's a few changes that I think will be helpful that I'll show you here in a minute. So portion versus serving size. A portion is, like we discussed, is what you typically serve. So it's not typically half a cup of ice cream, which is the actual serving size. And on the food label, the serving size represents what is a standard portion. So what is it actually meant to be? And we use serving size as a reference to determine what's recommended generally. And sometimes it can be hard. Like, what's 3 ounces? We don't always know exactly what that is. And so it'll say servings per container on the nutrition facts label, but there are updates to the nutrition facts label that are going to be required. It was supposed to be this next year, but with changes in government, it was pushed off, and now they're giving companies until I believe it's 2020 or 2021, depending on the level of revenue. So if you make if you have less than 10 million in sales, then you have a little bit longer, because it's actually quite an endeavor to change all of the labels of your food. So it's understandable, and they're giving companies time, but you'll start seeing this, and I have seen this label sometimes in stores. So companies and food products are starting to kind of just go ahead and introduce it. And they did think it was supposed to be next year until recently. So some of the changes to point out, the servings per container is just listed above, and then it gives a general serving size. The calories are in bold. They are actually adding a line. Does this laser? Oh, yeah. Ooh, maybe not. It just.
Use the laser on that.
Oh, okay. Oh. Okay, so the tin includes 10 grams of added sugar. That's required, which is really helpful because we know the added sugars are contributing significantly to chronic diseases, to weight. So we'll actually have to know, because carbohydrate can come from natural sources as well, like fruits are going to contain that. So if it's added sugar, you'll actually know, and that's what we need to kind of really be careful about and mostly avoid. And then the other couple changes, it used to show vitamin C and vitamin A, and now it doesn't need to. Does anyone want to guess why? Those are vitamins that when the food label first came out decades ago, those were vitamins that we were kind of deficient in, and we're no longer. And so we don't have to worry so much about getting enough of those. Most foods are fortified with them if they don't contain them naturally. And so we don't have an issue with that, but we do have issues with the ones that are shown here. So iron is staying on, calcium is staying on, but we're including vitamin D and potassium. So those will be added to the food label. Also, it's going to be more representative of an actual true serving. So ice cream is increasing in size from that example of half cup. It's now 2/3 cup, I believe. And if you have you ever noticed on like, if you have a soda, it'll say like 1.5 servings or something. And it's just like, that doesn't make sense. You're drinking the soda. And so those labels will have to just show what's actually contained in that container. Or if it's a bag of chips or something like that, it's going to have to reflect what's mostly reasonably eaten. Not because we're allowed to eat more, but because we are eating the full bag. So we're wanting people to understand what they're actually taking in rather than going, okay, I had 1.5 times, whatever that. Nobody's doing the math there. Or like a cup of soup is usually 2.5 servings, so it'll just be what's actually in the can of soup, that sort of thing. Or if there is multiple servings contained within, like a bag of something, but you would commonly eat that full bag, then it'll have a dual column, what's in a standard serving and what's actually in the full container. So I think that this will be really helpful in helping us understand what we're actually consuming and be a little bit more reflective. Oh, it's pointing out the differences. I'm not clicking through, but there are arrows. Oh, this is going to take a while. So there's 3. I just wanted to provide a little bit of education too, and then we'll go into each of the food categories and talk about what a typical serving actually is from those. And so I like to talk about nutrients in terms of energy yielding nutrients. There's 3 of those. I just popped 2 of them up, so if you were looking, does anyone know what they are? Yeah, carbohydrate, and then 2 more. Protein. What are we missing? Fat. Carbohydrate, protein, and fat are the main energy yielding nutrient. So non-energy yielding nutrients are what? Also essential for life. Does anyone want to guess what they are? I'll give you 1, water. And then there's 2 more. Any guesses? Vitamins and minerals. So those don't contain energy, which is in the form of calories, but they're essential for life. So we separate it like that. But we're going to just be talking about the 3 energy yielding ones because we're talking about portions, and really the purpose is to talk about what's contained within a typical serving and with calories. So carbohydrate, protein, and fat, but it's not just that simple. There's a lot of crossover here. So I like this chart to just show that, yes, some foods are mostly a source of a specific nutrient, but there's a lot of foods that can provide multiple nutrients. And all contain vitamins and minerals as well. So mostly fruits and vegetables and starches being like your grains and baked goods, things like that are starches. And also starchy vegetables, which are like winter squashes, and also peas, carrots. So fruits and vegetables are mostly carbohydrate, but they actually have protein in them too, if you look on the food label, and very little fat unless you're cooking it in fat. And then for protein, meats are mostly a source of protein. Depending on the meat, you're going to get some fat in there. So if you're having egg whites, it's basically just protein. If you're eating a cut of steak, then you're going to get more fat than if you're eating a lean source of fish or something like that. Chicken with skin on it, it's going to be more fatty. And then Some of the foods that actually cross all categories, so contain carbs, protein, and fat, are beans, nuts, seeds, soy products like tofu or edamame contain all three, and then also dairy products. So milk, yogurt, and cheese contain carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and that also depends on the type that you're having. So if you're eating cheese, it's going to have fat in it. If you're having fat-free milk, then there's not going to be fat in it, and it'll be mostly just carbohydrate and protein. And then there's some foods that contain only fat, and those are few, but oils, butter, and avocado are just fat sources. So sometimes I do see people, there's a little bit of confusion, like in terms of what is the main nutrient from certain foods. Like an example of that is nuts. We all often think I'm getting protein from nuts, but really nuts are mostly fat with a little bit of protein. So I just like to make sure that we're all on the same page there. Any questions on that chart? Okay, just more informative for you. So we'll go through each of the categories and just talk about a typical serving. I mentioned this before with the pasta example, but a typical serving of starch is about 80 calories, and 15 grams of carbohydrate is really a standard serving. So if you are, or someone you know is diabetic, they're really familiar with the carbohydrate because 15 grams is like one exchange for them. And there's 4 calories in a gram of carbohydrate and of protein. So you can kind of just do the math that way. That's what leads us to about 80 calories. There's a little bit of protein in starches too, depending on if it's whole grain or not. Whole grain, anything is going to have more protein than the white or enriched type of grains. So I think this can be surprising for people in terms of what a serving is, with the half cup of pasta being it. So it's actually cooked, right? That's even less than what it is, maybe closer to a 4th cup pre-cooked. Well, for pasta, it's not expanding a lot, but something like rice or oatmeal would expand a lot because it's absorbing that water. Oh. I'm not patient enough, I don't think. I think I missed. Yep, okay, fruit. So a standard serving of fruit is 60 calories, or again, 15 grams of carbohydrate. And this can be tricky because, I don't know about you, but lately I've been going to the store and the apples are like, the size of your head. So that's gonna be like probably 3 servings or something like that. So you just have to be cautious of it, of the actual portion, but typically it's gonna be a medium apple or a medium small. Half of a banana is really a serving. So a full banana, a large banana, is going to contain closer to 30 plus grams of carbohydrate. So it would be 2 servings of fruit. Or a cup of berries, they're a lot lower in carbohydrates and in calories. So if you like something sweet, berries is are a great option. And they have more fiber too, so it helps to keep you fuller. 15 grapes or a kiwi, which is pretty small, those are all servings. So just examples from the different food categories here. For milk, you're going to have 90 to 160 calories. That's going to be really dependent on if you're having fat-free or what kind of variety of fat your milk or yogurt contains. So it'll have anywhere from 1 to 8 grams of fat, and that is going to make up the difference in the calories. And then 12 grams of carbohydrate is standard. So this has changed a lot with now like Greek yogurt varieties. Those are really high in protein, much lower, and they can be lower in fat if you're having fat-free or plain no fat Greek yogurt. And then they also contain a little bit less carbohydrate too, the way that it's strained. But a standard serving is 8-ounce cup of milk or 3/4 cup of yogurt. So like a 6-ounce package would be a standard serving. Or 1/2 cup of ice cream, soon to be 2/3. Any questions on that? Vegetables, about 25 calories is a serving. And that's going to be a cup of raw vegetables or 1/2 cup of cooked vegetables. So if you're thinking about wanting to lose weight or maintain body weight, an easy way to do this is think about volume. So you're going to get a lot more from eating vegetables than you will from eating grains and fruits from that carbohydrate category. So you can have 1 cup of raw veggies is 25 calories versus a cup of fruit would be closer to 200. So you can try to start thinking about, okay, if you're trying to lose weight, a great way to do that would be to start snacking on vegetables and including those. You get more volume, and they're also much more filling. They're high in water content and high in fiber. So that's a good trick. And then we'll talk about protein. So anywhere from 50 to 100 calories is a serving of protein, and it's an ounce of meat. So typically when you're having, a good tool would be go to the USDA's website, and they have choosemyplate.gov, and you can put in your own information and any weight goals that you have, and it'll give you, these are the amounts of recommended serving sizes for each of these categories. So typically we're anywhere from like 6 to 10 ounces of meat is recommended, or of protein per day. So if you think about dividing that throughout the day, a couple of eggs in the morning, 3 to 4 ounces at lunch and at dinner is a good way to think about that. But it would be an ounce of cheese or an ounce of meat. 3 egg whites would be kind of the equivalent of an egg, just in protein content. But I would encourage you to eat the full egg. And it'll be about 7 grams of protein for an ounce. I like this, and I have these printed for you guys. It's a portion size guide, and I think it's the easiest way really to think about serving sizes and what you can start kind of aiming for. Of course, this is it's gonna be impacted by what else you've had that day and how hungry you are and if you're active, but it's a good guideline. So if you're thinking about just with a hand model, it's pretty easy. I have another handout that we can go through in a minute, and it shows you just different types of associations for serving. So it uses a softball and your thumb and dice and cards and things like that, just to give you different ideas of how to think about the portion recommendations. But for vegetables, it would be 2 handfuls. And so just like we were talking about, it depends on what you like, but I'd rather have a large something than a small something. So I'd rather go for 2 handfuls of vegetables than, a fistful of grains myself. But that's just a good guideline. So then with lean protein, you're looking at your full kind of hand there, and it's the thickness too. I think that this hand guide is really helpful because we all have different hand sizes, but it's reflective of your body size. And so if I was to eat based on the hand guide of my partner's hand, then I'm going to get too much food because he's 6'4", right? So just use your own hand, and it's kind of reflective of your own needs, generally. So it's not exact, but it's a great tool rather than having to walk around with measuring cups, right? And then fats and oil, you're just looking at a thumb, is about a tablespoon. So I think this is really helpful. Hopefully you will too. So a few portion control tips. One, there's been a lot of research on this, and I have a book listed at the end. It's called Mindless Eating. The author's Brian Wansink, and he has spent his career researching food psychology, and it's fascinating. This book is really fun read. It's just all these crazy studies. He has this restaurant lab, and he'll trick people all the time and come in for dinner, and you don't know what they're looking at, but there is one that they're filling this bowl of soup, this bottomless cup of soup, and you don't know that it's being filled from the bottom. And so they're looking to see how much you eat when your mind sees this full bowl versus the person sitting across from you that isn't getting that bottomless refill. Or just things like if you're eating with candlelight versus not, tend to eat more because it seems like a better quality meal, or the way that they call a food, even though it's the same, if there's a more fancy name. It's crazy, the research that he's done. But the plate size is a big one that's been shown. And if you eat off of a smaller plate, you tend to eat less. It looks visually more satisfying because your plate can be overfilled. Whereas if you're eating off of one of those large 13-inch plates and you're eating, only a small, you're not filling the plate, or there's half of it's full, then you think that you're not getting as much. So you can trick your brain, and eat off a smaller plate is a great tool, and that's really easy to start doing, or out of a small bowl. Plan meals in advance, that way you're in control of the actual portion that you're going to be having. Pre-portioned snacks, so like those little Ziploc snack bags are great. If you like to snack in the day, or even doing something like snacking at night, it's okay like to have a snack in front of the TV, but if you're going to do that, pre-portion it. Don't just sit next to the TV with a huge bag of Lay's potato chips and then, oh shoot, your trigger for stopping to eat is because you've reached the bottom of the bag. So just pre-portion can really help us eat reasonably. And even if you were to like portion it in the kitchen and have a small bowl and get yourself a serving and then go into the living room or something and watch TV, at least you're having to make a decision if you decide to get more, rather than just mindlessly grabbing more. You can like, am I really hungry? Do I really want to go back into the kitchen and get more? It's just a point for you to have to make that choice. You can ask for a to-go box from the get-go if you like go somewhere like the Cheesecake Factory where you know that they're serving you like meals for the week in one dinner. You can just ask up front for a to-go box if you think that would make it easier for you to make that decision of leaving some to go. If you're someone who has like that finish the plate mentality, this could be a good tool, or sharing a meal with someone. But just going ahead and boxing it up so it's out of your sight can be helpful. And think before you bite. So think about how much and what you're eating. This is just some mindful eating tips. And eat slowly, taste each bite. I know that sounds kind of silly and obvious, but I can think of a lot of times where I'm just like ravenous and you're eating so quickly, you're not even really tasting your food or giving your body a chance to process it and to signal that you've had enough and that you're full. Recognize how frequently you eat. This is just a lot about learning about your own habits so that you can then make changes if it makes sense for you. And enjoy the experience of eating too. So the pleasurable components of eating have been lost a lot in our society. Sitting around a dinner table, not eating with clutter, having a conversation with your friends or your family, this can really contribute to the enjoyment of food. And that's something that also research has shown helps to be satisfied with less. And I think that we have this craving around the food experience, and if we're not getting what we need out of that, we sometimes go back for more food when it can be something else that we're missing. So just be mindful of your own environment around food and think about ways that you can manipulate that environment to find it more enjoyable without actually having to eat more food itself. Does that make sense? Oh, hello. Okay, goals. So become aware of how much you are eating. That's like first and foremost. If you can start a journal, these ideas are meant to be temporary. So record everything you eat, measuring your food. This is not meant to be like, do this now for the rest of your life. Really, it can be a great tool for insight if you are willing to do that. Sometimes, ignorance is bliss, but it can be helpful to just go, shoot, I did not realize everything that I was eating, and that can be a good starting point for looking at your own habits and figuring out where you can make changes. So I like this saying, if you bite it, write it. If you drink it, ink it. So everything that you eat. So that makes you also accountable, because if you're going to grab, candy from the candy jar of your coworker's desk, it goes on the paper. And you can really start to see where things add up that way. And then also keeping in mind that unless you're drinking water, there's probably calories in your beverage. Those can add up too. So just keep track of things. And then once you actually see what you're eating, that can allow you to make some changes. So that's my recommendation. And then you can also get an idea of how much you're eating, how much quantity you're eating, and then look at thinking about some of the tips that we discussed. Can you eat from a smaller plate? Can you pre-portion your snacks? Can you baggie some things up to just help yourself out a little bit? At the end of the day, your diet is your control. And so even though our society and our environment make it really, really difficult to eat reasonably and to eat small portions, it's really up to us to control that for ourselves. And that book that I was mentioning is Mindless Eating, and it's just a fun read. It talks a lot about these food psychology experiments and research that he and his lab have done, and gives tips around it. So, okay, we've found that people do this, so here's how you can actually use that to your advantage. Do you guys have questions? You can go through the handouts for a minute. We have plenty of time. So I just wanted to hand a few of these out just for hopefully useful tools for you too. So there's this portion distortion handout that a couple of dietitians associated with the University of Nebraska created, and I just thought it was kind of helpful. It goes over some of the same, if you want to hand those back too, examples of 20 years ago versus today, and some of them are different. So it includes pizza, hamburgers, things like that. Just to give you an idea of what it would take to burn that off. And then on the back of that is just the My Plate that I was referencing earlier. So if you're interested in figuring out what is the right portion for you and your body, and any goals that you have to lose weight or to maintain or to gain, then you can look at the choosemyplate.gov, and it'll give you specific recommendations based on your age, your gender, your activity level, and you can start to get an idea from there using our portion size guide, and then also this portion size guide of what is that serving, and that can be helpful. They also have planning tools. They have a tracking tool on there too, where you can input the things that you've eaten, and it'll show you, total calories down to specific vitamins, and did you get enough? This next handout is food serving sizes, get a reality check, and this is kind of just what I was mentioning. So what's considered a single serving has actually changed, and that the food labels will be reflecting more of what we actually eat rather than what we're asked to eat. And then one more is the side-by-side comparison. So just that nutrition label, what it is currently and what it will be, and just what to look for. Again, highlighting the changes. What questions do you guys have? Questions or even tips, if you have tips to share amongst each other with things that you've noticed in your own environment, or things that you've been able to incorporate that have helped you control portions? Nothing's helped. At least you're honest.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about those shakes that you can take to replace a meal?
It depends on, is there like a specific shake or just generally?
Just
So
general.
it really depends on the quality of the shake. So what is it that you're having? Protein shakes are used in a lot of weight loss offices. And so usually that they have seen effects from that. I have colleagues that work in weight loss centers, and they usually replace one meal a day with a protein shake. But I would advise you to be careful with that. If you're just gonna, because that can vary a lot. Like a shake can be healthy or unhealthy. And so typically for a protein shake, you would be getting at least 20 grams of protein in that shake if you're gonna be replacing a meal. And then there's different quality brands out there for protein powders. You can also do things like add flaxseed or chia if you're making your own smoothie to replace. Some berries would be great, trying to get healthy nutrients, avoiding the recipes that call for adding just a ton of orange juice and this and that, and all of a sudden you may as well have just had a meal. Does that make sense? But it can be effective. I would just be careful about reading the label and making sure that it's doing what you want it to do, with really 20 grams of protein being a minimum, 20 to 30 max for what you should be getting to replace. Does that make sense? It's a good question though. Protein shakes are popular. I find that when people don't have a source of fiber and a source of fat with their protein, it doesn't last long. You might be hungry in an hour or two. And so that's something else to think about. Okay, what could be a source of fiber? Fiber helps us stay fuller longer. So again, the chia seeds or flax seeds or hemp seeds, that can be a good contributor of both fat and fiber. So that's something that's really great to add to those that tastes pretty good. Or doing something like adding berries or some type of fruit in there to sweeten it a little bit can be helpful and can contribute to fiber. If you're making your own smoothie, you can do stuff like add spinach and kale, and that's going to be a good source of fiber. But it'll change the color, but people usually can't taste that there's spinach in there. I know a lot of moms that sneak that into their kids' smoothies, and they don't even know it's in there. They probably wouldn't drink it if they did. So things like that could be helpful too. Any other questions, feedback, tips to share? Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you guys coming. It is getting warm in here, right? Okay, you're with me. Maybe it's just the windows in here with the sun. I don't want to complain though, because soon enough we're going to be freezing, so I'll take it. Well, if you have a question for me, I'll just be here for a minute. If you want to come ask separately, feel free.